Good evening and welcome to the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. Tonight I have a show that I'm really thrilled to do. I have someone that is on the fence about whether she believes or not, and that is Victoria Lynn. And I have a researcher from New Mexico, and that's Rich Daniels. So tonight they're going to have a Q&A, and we hope this goes well. And if it does go well, we're going to try to have more shows like this. If you do like this show and you like the content of it, and you want to see more, hit just hit one through the show. And if you don't think you're into it, hit two. That way I know you can always reach out to me on Facebook. I don't know what I did with my chat. I've been trying to respond to everyone. But something popped up and I don't know what I did, which is why it's a not so perfect Bigfoot show. Hello. Swamp Kitty should not crash us. She's over there watching the saltwater tank. I think she's going to plan an attack. But thank you, Brian, for being here. Thank you, Outer Space. I'm not going to read the rest of that. Thank you, Tina. Tina, if you guys didn't know, Tina is one of my research partners. She has actually has a mountain lion and a three-toed Bigfoot creature on her property. Yes, she does, and she's a local too, Victoria. So, Richie, we're going to go to you and let you introduce yourself, and then we're going to go to Victoria. Then we're going to start some Q&A.
All right. Well, thank you for one inviting me on here. I think we were talking earlier, and I told you there's a few of my research colleagues that find this particular idea of a show a little cringy to be on because they're worried about the questions that are answered and how they'll be directed and who's going to be running, who's going to drive the show. But honestly, I think this is a great idea, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate being the one that you asked to do this, because I love talking to people that have the different perspective. I've been doing this over 19 years. And, after 19 years of research and tromping around in the woods and, interviewing over 700 people the way I have, you tend to get a little complacent sometimes, or you get a little, you don't pay attention to all the details anymore. So it's folks, like Victoria, she'll probably spur my my brain a little bit and get me going.
Victoria, would you like to tell folks about you, what you do, a little bit of your background?
I'm Victoria Lee, country girl, born and raised, and still got it. Got an 8th grandchild on the way and a big old fur baby in the house. So if you see a fuzzy giant pop up beside me, it's Goliath, and he's aptly named. I do life insurance, done real estate, had a teaching background, so a little bit of everything. And I'm pretty open-minded on most things. I think we had gotten in a conversation just basically, a lot of people write off Bigfoot. You hear, oh, it's just a fluke thing or whatever, or people making up stuff, whatever. I'm open-minded in the sense that I believe in God. I can't see him, but I believe in him. I know we've had dinosaurs, and skeletons they found and this, that, and the other, and nobody seems to have a problem with the perception of that or the fact that there might be even larger animals in the ocean than what we've seen. And that's been out there for a while now. So to me, the fact that there may be a Bigfoot, I'm curious. I'm curious as to wanting to check it out, find out, learn more information, and just really know more about it. So that's kind of my stance on it right now. I'm on the fence, I guess you'd say.
All right. So, Victoria, I'm going to give you and Richard a screen. Ask your first question.
My first question, how long have people been No. How long has Bigfoot been said to be around? What was the initial concept of how long or how old they could be? Where the years they originated from, that kind of a thing.
Okay, well, again, there's so much that we don't know when it comes to that. I can just tell you by what the studies will tell you. In Native American lore, these creatures have been part of that for dozens of generations going back. They are part of First Nations totem poles and in some of those. And you read a totem pole from the bottom up. So that what's most important is on the bottom. And oftentimes you see a representation of Sasquatch on the bottom of a totem pole. So it's it goes back that way. When it comes to Western cultures, the Epic of Gilgamesh mentioned a creature named Enkidu, and the description sounds very much like a Bigfoot. In fact, I included an excerpt of the Epic of Gilgamesh in my book, Footprints in the Mind, to talk about the emotional impact of just witnessing what one of these creatures is like. Wow. And, that's 4,500, 5,000 years ago, somewhere in that range. We know that Leif Erikson, sailing the coast of what was now Massachusetts, sighted creatures from his ship on the, in the tree line of the shore. He described large, hairy creatures bigger than any man. Oh, wow. And that was in the year 980 AD. So, we know that they have been a near constant presence for humans that have been in the Western Hemisphere. We're pretty sure that they've been here as long as we have, but we can't say that for sure until we find out more, until we get deeper into that research. We won't be able to say for certain, but I think it's safe to say thousands of years is that we know that we've had a coexisting presence with them.
So how long have people actually been, because Johnny and Victoria and talking to different people and stuff, obviously people will get together and go look for Bigfoot. How long have people actually been like really out there searching, trying to find sightings? Is that something new that just came about? And what prompted that?
Well, really, the Patterson-Gimlin film in 1968 really blew things open for people. It was something that was popularized at that point. There had been newspaper stories. There had been regional stories about different creatures that were there, and the descriptions all add up to Bigfoot. And we know that was around, but really it was the Patterson-Gimlin film that popularized the search. So we're talking 50 to 55 years.
You said 68, 1968?
I believe it was 68, yeah.
56 years, 55 years. 1 year younger than me. That's how I take that one. So how many sightings, if you had to take a guess, or from what you know, how many sightings have there been?
Well, personally, I've interviewed over 700 witnesses. And that's over a 19-year span. And that's a lot. But really, when it comes to all the sighting reports that I've been able to track down and the different stories that I've been able to track down, they're in the thousands upon thousands. And I would estimate that the number of sightings that I've reviewed in one form or another is in excess of about 14,000.
Have you actually seen one?
4 times.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I've encountered them 4 times, visually 3 times.
Wow. So what areas are they thought to inhabit? What kind of?
Every state of the U.S. except Hawaii has reported sightings. Every province in Canada has reported sightings.
Oh, wow.
There are even some places in Mexico where there are reported sightings as well.
That's interesting. This is definitely a big question for me because I'm talking about going on one of these outings or trips. Is there any indication of them being dangerous, aggressive?
Well, there are different stories out there, like Albert Ostman back in I believe it was about 1908 or so, was out hiking and hunting and was sleeping for the night and actually got kidnapped by what he described as a family of Bigfoot, and they carried him back to their where they were staying, and
Mhm.
he was around them. I believe it was for 2 or 3 days, and
Wow.
he finally got them sick on some snuff. And they as they ran out trying to take care of that, going down to trying to get water, he was able to escape.
That's
So
funny.
I've read reports where people are dragged out of their tents and dragged for 100 or so feet.
Oh,
The very famous incident in California, Ape Canyon, where I believe it was 5 miners were basically pinned down inside of their cabin under a continuous attack of rocks and pounding on the walls and everything by a number of Bigfoot.
wow.
The Native American lore talks about going to war with these things. In the Sierra Mountains of California, there was a reported war between the First Nations tribe there and Bigfoot, and it came down to the fact that Bigfoot was kidnapping women and taking children, and they believed they were eating them.
Oh,
And there's all kinds of things out there where these creatures have interacted in very negative ways.
yeah,
But
that's
in all of those, you're finding the vast majority of encounters are very brief, very random, and very benign when it comes right down to it.
okay. Yeah.
It's I see you, you see me, that kind of thing. And what really happens in those is that the sight of these things, experiencing these creatures, is enough of a shock to really scare people. And that's what I detail in
Take,
my book about how the emotional and psychological impact
mm,
that these things have on people and the reality change that it really is.
yeah. I think it would be kind of mind blowing for a lot of people because if you've got the concept of, oh, it doesn't exist, and all of a sudden there it is, it's like, wow.
Hmm.
So
Yep,
I get that part.
I can tell you my first experience. What I saw and what I was experiencing didn't even register in my mind as to what it was I was looking at.
Wow.
I was looking at a silhouette that I could
Mm.
see in a tree line, and I thought the sounds I had heard prior to that were a bear,
Uh-huh.
and I I saw this figure in the tree line, and I just assumed it was a bear, but it was huge. It
Yeah.
didn't look anything like a bear,
Oh my gosh.
and in my mind, I think I'm seeing a bear, but none of it's adding up.
Hmm.
And it was a thing called cognitive dissonance, where your mind just does not process what it's experiencing.
Yeah.
And I just wrote it off. I mean, I was able to break contact and get back in the house and everything, and just wrote it off as this really weird looking bear. And 5 years later, I was able to come to the realization of what it was I actually saw, because there was no way it was a bear. It
That's
was
amazing.
Yeah, it was far too big to be a bear. And
Um,
so, and even then, 5 years later, and I had moved 1,000 miles away.
uh-huh.
The emotional impact crushed me. I
Wow.
just, I mean, I was in a daze for about 2 days.
Gosh. Wow. Yeah, it would be interesting. I can see that. I would see how that would happen. Um, Curiosity question. Does
Mhm.
anybody have a clue how intelligent they are thought to be, or any clues?
Well, I can tell you what has been described by a lot of people. They are described as being excellent mimics
Ah,
as far as other animals, and you really have to know what you're hearing to tell the difference.
oh
That's how
wow.
good they are.
Huh.
Yeah, and they have been reported to have being able to provide some sort of chatter that sounds like little children laughing,
Oh wow.
or
Mm.
playing or whatever. I can tell you they have problem solving level intelligence for sure. We
Mm.
know that because they have opened doors to houses. There have been several houses where they have a glass door on the front, and they have found actual massive handprints on the inside of the window.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and there's so
Mm.
we know that they have that kind of intelligence. They have a tactical intelligence that's been witnessed in their hunting
Mhm.
techniques. They're
What do they
and
eat?
yes,
What do they eat?
no, yes, they will eat anything. They've been reported
Including.
as eating just about everything you can think of.
Mm.
They've been seen digging for grubs and worms. They've been seen ransacking
Wow.
orchards. They've been seen on beaches digging for clams and mussels,
Okay.
as well as they've been seen hunting down deer and wild boar and everything else. A particular delicacy that they seem to like are domesticated animals because they're easy prey.
Okay, that's not good.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
um.
I mean, whenever you hear about an area that has a sudden spike in missing dogs and cats, you have to wonder.
Oh. So so are they pretty much known to be like in just like heavily wooded areas, mountains, or can they
Well,
be closer to towns or yeah.
there are a lot of sightings in northeast Ohio that are 30 minutes from downtown Cleveland.
Oh wow.
They can be that close. But the key thing is you have to remember they live on our in-betweens. They are largely nocturnal.
Okay.
We are not.
Okay.
The times when they're active is a time when there's not a lot of people around or doing anything, and they live in very remote areas most of the time. But
Wow.
what we consider to be remote, you would be surprised. I live here in New Mexico, and I live in the largest city in New Mexico, which is Albuquerque. And the
Yeah.
Albuquerque metro area has about 1 million people. But
Whoa.
this is still a town where you can drive 20 minutes and be in the middle of nowhere.
Oh wow.
And there's tremendous space out there, and you just would not believe what can be out there. There's a lot of folks that don't know that the South American jaguar has been spotted in Arizona. That there's
Oh,
all kinds of things out there. You know, I mean, you just don't know. You
yeah.
just don't know. So they can be either. I mean, basically, you can count on them looking for three things. One is water. The other is food, and the third is security.
Mm.
And that means either shelter or a safe place to be where they are. And they will stay in those areas regardless of the conditions of the weather or anything else, as long as they have those three things. So it can be very close. I had a friend of mine in South Carolina who
Mm.
reported a series of sightings in an area that was very close to a marina
Oh
on
wow.
one of the large lakes down there. But then again, I've talked to people that have been out in the middle of nowhere in western or eastern Oregon, and yet there's high activity in there where there's nothing around.
Oh,
So if you hear about where they are, that you can be sure that they have food, water, and security wherever they go, and they will appropriate abandoned buildings. They will look for caves. They will do anything they can just to find that security and that safety.
so are they just as possibly scared of us, curious of us as we are of them, or not
They
really?
are well, they're extremely curious. I've heard them described as using us as their YouTube or their TV. They will sit and watch and
Oh
watch and
wow.
watch. Yeah, we can
Huh.
be very interesting to them, but another thing about that is that we are also probably easily the biggest threat that they have as well.
That makes sense.
Because I mean, let's face it, human beings get a hold of something and they usually end up destroying it,
Yeah, that's right.
and
That's
that's
right.
something to know. But there seems to me to be a cultural memory among them
Mm.
that wants them to avoid us for sure. Why? I don't know. They are physically superior to us in just about every way you could come about, but
Wow.
they want to avoid us. And I have my own ideas as to what that can be. I think it goes back 15,000 years
Uh-huh.
to the younger Dryas period that you had with the last ice age, and it became all of a sudden, there's more and more evidence showing that we had a thriving human culture back then, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and it stopped like in one day, is what the evidence points to. So
Right.
basically, we went from a thriving culture back then to rubbing sticks together to make fire.
Wow.
And I think there may have been a dying, a thinning population of these creatures that were out there, but they're survivors.
Yeah.
And I think it became a very tenacious competition for resources that may have been limited at that time. The
Wow.
great flood stories that you hear in all kinds of cultures and all kinds of faiths and religions is turning out to be very accurate,
Wow.
because it looks as though there may have been an impact of an asteroid or a comet or something that melted a tremendous amount of ice all at once in Greenland. And at
Okay.
that point, that's a lot. I mean, you're talking miles and miles and miles and miles of ocean
Yeah.
that's got so much more water, and of course the water came up fast. So
Wow.
the physical evidence that's being found out there right now is amazing. It's absolutely amazing to see that. So I think that may come from that contentious attitude, that contentious relationship that they had for resources, for very limited resources at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the cultural memory of that stayed with them, but somewhere along the lines we lost it, and now we're just rediscovering these creatures and really noticing what's going on.
That's amazing. I know you said they have like a chatter. Do they try to reach out in any other way to communicate, or just basically really try to avoid, unless, except for the ones obviously that the stories where they've been aggressive?
Well,
Do they try to communicate at all?
yeah, I have a colleague, BigfootTalk.com. His name is Neil, and he will tell you that they mind speak, that they are on a
Wow.
wavelength with him. My research partner here in New Mexico, Chris Crane, he believes that they use infrasound, which is ultra low frequency sound between 8 and 20 hertz that we can't hear,
Yeah.
but it's still prevalent as any sound. He believes they use that for communication and for echolocation to be able to do, and it has to do with the major crest that they have on in their skulls that is
Mhm.
able to receive these kind of things. And when you talk about sound like that, you're talking about vibration, you're talking about resonance,
Uh-huh.
and that resonance hits people in different ways.
Right.
And I think Neil most surely is picking up on things because he can think about things, and all of a sudden they'll manifest a day or two later. They
Wow.
will be able to deliver messages to him. He said he gets pictures in his mind about how it works. Now,
Wow.
when it comes to interaction, there's a chapter in my book where I talk about reverse engineering behaviors from them. There was a lady I came into contact with who was having just the most horrible time in her property, where she was not able to sleep. She had chronic headaches. She was sick all the time, just sick to her stomach and nauseated all the time. And then she began sleepwalking and not knowing how it was going. She'd never done this before in her life.
Mm.
All this time, they were finding signs of Bigfoot activity, which they couldn't tell anybody. Of course, they didn't want anybody to think they were crazy. And she was at her wit's end when I ran into her on one of the Bigfoot chat rooms or one of the Bigfoot pages on Facebook.
Wow.
And what I did was able to talk to her about it and get her situation done. I said, okay, number one, you got to build up your house, because I think there's a turf war that's going on. They're trying to contest the property.
Oh, wow.
And I said, you got to build up your house. I said, you got to get some soundproofing on the outer, to the walls of your bedroom. It's that foam rubber stuff that you see in the studios of radio stations and things like that.
Yeah.
Get some of that. Get some thick, heavy curtains
Mm-hmm.
and everything like that. I said, you got to make sure you have your armor built up. And then what I told her was, okay, the only chance you've got is to recognize that they're there and recognize that it's okay.
Yeah.
And so I told her to take some natural materials and fashion whatever shape she wanted to, just
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was, but it had to be stuff that was found around the area.
Mm-hmm.
She made 4 little half moon, kind of crescent moon kind of things.
Yeah.
I told her, I said, hang one on the side of your house, that, and that basically says, this is us, this is where we are. And then take the ones that you have left and hang them from trees right at the tree line.
Ah,
And it basically defines the area that they want.
gotcha.
And it says, and it says to them, look, we're not worried about any of that other parts out in the woods. We're just worried about our yard and our property here.
Yeah.
And the way it worked out is that all her problems stopped after that.
Wow.
And she began gifting for them, as she began gifting food, gifting toys, different things like that. And now it's become sort of a transactional type of communication that they have between the two. And to the point where they'll see them working on their farm, like in their garden or something like that, pulling weeds, and it gets too dark or they have to quit. And they'll come back the next day and all the rest of the weeds are pulled.
Wow.
And none of their neighbors or anybody else had done it, and there are things that they're trying to move on their property, heavy objects, like it was an old swing set that was there, complete with the cement stanchions that had been in the ground. The thing weighed about 300 or 400 pounds. She and her husband tried to move it. They couldn't do it. They came back the next day and it was moved.
That's wild.
And it's kind of this thing. So you get that relationship going back and forth. And really it basically says, I see you. It's okay. I'm not afraid. They come out onto the property at night, and that's fine. But they really has defined that space and that relationship with them. So there is an indirect kind of communication that way, and I think it works out. So far it's worked out in that situation. But that's the kind of intelligence you're dealing with. They can recognize those things, and they leave gifts of their own. When she left those 4 half moons out there, she came back the next day. One of them was gone, and it had been replaced with a bough of holly that was there. So
Rich,
there's either some very creative homeless people out there, or she's hit the nail right on the head.
Rich, you may I squeeze you got someone in the chat wanting to ask 2 questions. I wanted to ask, I'm sorry, Victoria, but I wanted to ask, changed. Brian, I love you, Brian. Brian wants to know, do they get mad if she forgets to gift them? And he also had a question about, I guess, the Bowman incident.
Mm-hmm. The Bowman incident? I thought I saw that on there. Let me see.
Yeah. He wanted to know, did he think that incident happened because the trappers were taking their resources?
It could be. It's hard to say when that's a very when it's just a written description of what was going on and things like that. It very well could be. I mean, it very well could be that they were too close.
Wow.
And too close to an area that they shouldn't have been in, and that would have been enough. They will defend their territory if they need to. They've demonstrated that in the past. I mean, but just like anything else out there competing for the resources to survive, of course they will, and they will defend their own as well.
So do they kind of function basically just like we do? Is what it sounds like.
Well, thrown into the same situation, maybe they do it. Maybe they would. I think we're in a situation where we adapted to the conditions that were around technologically to deal with the Ice Age. They adapted naturally. My belief is they are another type of human. Okay. I mean, we know that at one point there along with modern humans, there were 3 other types of humans coexisting at the same time.
Well, now in the Bible, in Genesis, it talks about giants.
Mm-hmm.
So
the book of Enoch and the Apocrypha does as well. There's all kinds of legends of giants all throughout and it's all over the world. It's not just here in North America. Yeah. There are legends of giants everywhere. But to get back to the one question about the gifting, the lady in question does not have regular gifting days. So she doesn't have a regular schedule with it. She just brings stuff out or puts stuff out when she has it. And I think they kind of understand. But it was a particularly cold December where she is, and she took blankets out there. And the funny thing was, the blankets weren't taken. The food items that were there, they took, but they didn't take the blankets.
guess they didn't need them.
No, again, that's the adaptability that these
That's
creatures have.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I like it. So for people like me who don't know that much about this, and obviously I'm asking a lot of questions, where do you go to learn more that's pretty reliable resources? What do you do? Other than I'm probably going to be shadowing Victoria and Johnny around a little bit here and there.
Well, I can tell you, in 19 years of doing this,
Yeah.
I've had to build up a network of people that I've learned to be able to rely on. I've learned to be able to trust, and it's been through the work that they do and the work that they do on a continuous basis.
Okay.
And I'm going to have to tell the dirty secret of the Bigfoot community here, Victoria. And the dirty secret is that about 95% of the stuff that you see out there is complete chicken fried crap.
Wow.
And there's people that are just guessing, they're speculating, they have read sighting reports and they piece together their own type of hypothesis that's out there. I tend to gravitate towards the people that are doing real science. And I can tell you what we know from real science and what we are out there quantifying that's being found out there. I will not tell anybody that they're crazy or anything like that. But, you know, I mean, because I've experienced way too many weird things in this research myself. And so I don't tell people that know they're wrong or know they're crazy, but I always ask for data. That's the one thing I would tell you to do. Ask for data. And if all they've got is anecdotal evidence, then you have to keep that right where it is. If they produce data, if they have something to offer, then it's something that you really need to pay attention to.
Okay.
Richie, Tina wants to know if you have any experiences with them messing with horses, because I know for a fact she had an incident at her barn.
Ooh.
And Victoria, by the way, this is 20 miles from us.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, that's got me interested.
I've read a few. Yeah, I've read a few of encounters where they've gotten after horses where horses have been injured. I've also read a couple of encounters where the horse's mane has been braided.
What?
So it's the full gamut of things there. There are reports of these dogs or dogs being taken and eaten. There are also reports of like my friend Neil. There are reports that that these creatures just love their dogs and play with their dogs and treat them well. So I think they run a very wide spectrum of emotional states like we do. But yeah, they will get after a horse, apparently from time to time. And I mean, let's face it, if you got hungry enough, your standards would spread way out as far as finding something to eat.
I ain't eating no cat. No. But anyone in the chat, I'm writing your questions down so after these.
Not gonna eat a cat.
Okay, I see Brian has one. Brian has one there that says, "Have I ever had any experiences that made me think twice about continuing the research?" Yes.
Good question.
Absolutely. In 2013, my third encounter. Basically, I had spent 2 years tracking down this area, and I thought I had the place where they were leaving a national park to go out and forage around a local town. And Victoria, I told this story when you had me on the show.
You did. I love it.
The good news is I was right. The bad news is I was right. And basically one of these things walked up on my position in the middle of the night, and here I'm sitting there with no night vision gear, nothing, because I'd walked out there thinking I was just going to be the man, and I was going to be famous for discovering them and everything like that. And all I had on me was a can of bear spray and a camping knife. So this thing basically stomped around about a 270-degree axis around my position, barking and chirping and screaming and stomping. I know it was stomping because I could feel the vibrations in the ground.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
know it was screaming and barking because I could feel the sound waves hitting me in the face.
Mm.
And this thing was angry. And I realized I had no way out. I had just had to sit there, and all I could think to do was not let the thing circle behind me. And so I just pivoted. I was sitting on a 5-gallon bucket, and I just pivoted wherever the noise was and tried to keep it right in front of me. And it went on for about 40 minutes or so.
Oh no.
And when it left, I realized it's still dark. I can't get out of here. If I use my flashlight, I'm going to lose any night vision that I have. And so I just sat there. I just had to sit there till first light. And the thing before it left, it broke off a branch and threw it at me. And it landed about 7 or 8 feet to my left. And when I saw it the next morning, it was easy to tell that branch weighed about 60 or 70 pounds. He threw it about 20 to 25 yards.
Wow. That's
I have a
amazing.
That's what I had in front of me.
I have a question for Victoria.
Yeah.
Victoria, being outside of the Bigfoot community, and we know you're going to go out with us.
Definitely now.
What do you think about speaking with people like Richie and seeing he's just a normal, very intelligent, he's an author. He wrote a book.
Yeah, I heard that.
Is that shocking to you that he is just a normal, everyday person? Or what did you expect from him coming here tonight?
No, it's not really shocking. It's encouraging, if anything, that, you know, it just makes me feel more confident in what I'm hearing. I definitely want to get the book. That was the other thing. I wanted to make sure I get that information. He seems to know a lot about this, and it scared me up to where I definitely really want to. Now there's kind of like this anticipation of, you know, going out and actually experiencing and seeing what this is about. So yeah, that's been interesting. So.
All right, I'll let
Well,
you
one
guys.
thing I can tell you, when you go out in the woods, go out there with the expectation to have a great time in a wilderness experience with your friends.
Yeah.
Don't go out there with the expectation that you're going to solve the mystery in one night and it's all going to be this easy wrapped up. Because I can tell you, over 19 years, I've had 4 encounters with these things, and 2 of them have been because I hooked up with some very smart people to be able to have those. So, you know, before my initial encounter, I'll tell you, I was a Bigfoot agnostic. I didn't even think about the subject at all. It didn't even ring in my mind, which is why I had the reaction I did to my first encounter. Bigfoot wasn't even in the landscape for me. And I was more of a stargazer. I liked looking through telescopes and looking at stars and planets and astrological bodies and everything. That was great for me. But then I had to take all that and turned it towards this kind of research, because once I had that experience and once I understood where it was and what was going on, I had to know more. It gets in your blood, and you have to know more. I can listen to the harshest skeptic, and they can say whatever they want about this subject, but it doesn't change anything that I've experienced and I've gone through.
Well, and that takes me back to mine and her conversation about it. It still floors me that people are so skeptical about it. I mean, how can you say it doesn't? You know, I mean, if you can prove it that it doesn't, fine. But evidently nobody's been able to prove that. And there's been plenty of people that's had sightings and evidence and things to say that it does exist. So where does the skepticism come into it? You know, I don't get that part.
She was so scared she probably still has that cup of coffee in her hand. I couldn't help it. I had to throw that in there.
I don't think she knows about
that.
When I had my encounter, I was smoking a cigarette because I used to smoke, and I had coffee. And the joke is, I never dropped my coffee. You know, I was just like, "Whoa,
that's funny." That would be me too.
Brian says, "What does Rich think that the most impressive evidence, Bigfoot evidence, aside from the Patterson Gimlin film?" Brian is on a ball. He's on a roll tonight.
Well, I'm gonna beat my own drum here a little bit, because I am in the business of behavioral evidence. And the behavioral evidence is what happened when people have these encounters, what they go through. My findings will tell you that the kind of emotional and psychological impact they go through, that witnesses go through, is mirror image of what people who go through other forms of trauma are. People that have traumatic car accidents, or people that go through that witness acts of violence, or severe neglect, or things like that. I worked in the mental and behavioral health field for about 12 years. I was one of the boots on the ground people that worked with these folks all the time, trying to help them be able to recover from the trauma that they experienced. And the only reason that I got into this research was because I realized that some of the people I was interviewing as Bigfoot witnesses were talking about the same after effects as the people I worked with on a daily basis. And so in 2019, I authored a study that documented 148 cases of people that of the different after effects and different reactions, stress reactions that they had. And all it did was just say, hey, if these people are, if this thing doesn't exist, these people are having very real reactions to something that doesn't exist.
Right.
And some of these reactions you cannot fake.
Yeah.
You can't do it. I've watched people try to fake being traumatized, and they last about 10 minutes before they break character somehow, and you can see it. Just in talking to people, everybody I talked to for that study, I initially interviewed over 400 people. I kept 148 for this study. Everybody, consistent stories, consistent reports of what they were going through. Talking to them about different aspects that the study documented, and it really laid it out there that there's evidence in the witnesses beyond their stories.
Wow.
There's evidence in how they react to these things, because I've had it happen to me twice. I've talked about both of those stories tonight. Both of those stories were change my shorts moments that just I never would have thought about having before. And it's only because I had these experiences with these creatures. And the behavioral evidence to me is unquestionable. There's absolutely, positively something out there that's scaring the daylights out of people.
Okay. I like it. I think I want to find out.
I'm trying to see if there's any
Brian's
more.
at it again.
Yeah.
That film. I'm sorry. That film you were talking about. How can I find that? Look that up. What was it called?
The Patterson Gimlin film. Yes, that's the most famous. When you see the famous pose, or the pose that you have for the Bigfoot, that's taken from the Patterson Gimlin film. And you can Google it and put it on, or YouTube. Just go to YouTube, put Patterson Gimlin, and you'll get all kinds of takes of it. It's the most famous film out there. I would also recommend the Freeman footage, Paul Freeman's footage. That's very legit. For sure. There's no doubt, as far as I'm concerned. He was actually a Forest Service worker. I think a Washington State Forest Service worker who got on the trail of one of these things.
Oh wow!
You'll get a good look at it. That's for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Brian said, in all of your research, do you find more negative encounters, neutral, or positive? That had to be Elaine's question.
The impact more often than not is some sort of negative. Not because of anything the creature does or anything like that, just because of the process of going into it. And most encounters are very random. Almost all the people that encounter these creatures never are looking for them. It's basically accidental. And it's such a jarring experience to go through, because society tells you they don't exist. Society will tell you that over and over again, that they don't exist. Yet there they are. And then you realize, wow, to say this thing is big doesn't even come close. You're talking something that's 8 or 9 feet tall, has shoulders 3 or 4 feet wide, probably weighs in the area of 700 pounds or so. Okay. And the thought occurs to you that if that thing wanted to, it could walk over and pull your arms out of the sockets, and there's nothing you could do about it. I mean, people have reported shooting these things in the chest with deer hunting rifles, and it knocks them down, but they get up and walk away. So you're talking about very strong, very hardy individuals that can go out and take a lot of punishment. And honestly, I don't think you can take enough firepower with you to do anything if you really wanted to, because if these things want you, they'll come get you. Okay, but what we have going for us is the fact that they don't want us. They don't want anything to do with us for the most part. The only time they come near us is when we have resources that they can use.
Okay.
Tell her, well, I will tell her, the Patty film was a female Bigfoot.
Okay.
She had
There's visible breasts.
Really?
Yep. And what hoaxer do you know of? What gorilla suit have you ever seen that was a female suit?
Never.
And especially back in the late 60s.
Never.
Especially back in the late 60s. No, it's just not happening.
Never.
Just not happening. There have been too many recreations that people have
the more
tried.
I'm hearing, I'm believing that this is definitely, I was already, open-minded to it, but I'm definitely believing what I'm hearing. So I'd love to get to actually experience, however long that takes. Hey, I'm an outdoor girl. I'm good. I'll go.
Well, I mean, but I'm going to warn you. I'm going to caution you. The first chapter of my book talks about a fellow who had an experience. Lifelong hunter at that point, had been hunting since he was a child, going out, and he was out hunting deer, sitting in a deer stand, and had an encounter with one of these things, and it scared him out of those woods. He ended up never going back to that property ever.
Oh wow!
And he, to the point where that property used to be on his route to work. He changed his route to work and added 20 minutes each way to his commute for 20 years.
Wow.
Because he didn't want to go back in those woods. He eventually went back to hunting, but he never went anywhere near that property. And that property was for a good friend of his. And that friend, he never went to visit that friend again. That friend always had to come visit him. He always made up an excuse to have that friend visit him.
What's the name of your book?
That's the impact that you can have. This fella didn't.
What's the name of your book?
This fella didn't tell anybody about his experience for 36 years.
Wow.
Okay, that's 13,000 days he went through reliving this traumatic experience his whole life. It cost him a marriage. It cost him, all kinds of personal freedoms and everything else that he didn't live his life.
So the psychological impact.
It was huge. It was huge.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm getting questions being text to me. Richie, are orbs related to Bigfoot? And B, should you be armed?
Yes, armed.
Oh, always I done figured that out. I know they're gonna be.
Yeah. But here's the deal.
That was from Lynn. Okay.
Yeah. Here's the deal. Be armed for what you know is out there. Be armed for a bear. Be armed for mountain lion. Be armed for coyotes. Be armed for that. Make sure you're prepared for that, because you're far more likely to encounter something out there like that than you are of running across a Bigfoot that will be aggressive enough to where you need a firearm. Now, about orbs, I have no personal experience whatsoever with those. I have interviewed, more than a few people that have reported those. I've read all kinds of reports about them. I've watched all the shows like everybody else has, and I don't know what the connection would be. I don't know how it would be. That's one of the big questions that we have to find out, and we have to, continue to do good research and find somebody who's actually going to go out there and start collecting data on that specific phenomenon. And it's only through this kind of study that we're going to be able to piece together this mystery. Kind of the research that I do is very specified, very narrow look. There's Somebody, I know a friend of mine who's trying to really center on their language, on their communication capabilities. Another is looking at stick structures. Another is looking at the food sources and and the water sources that are available, and and trying to come up with a reliable seasonal map of where you can encounter these things, so we can further advance the study. But it's only through that specification that we do, because the one thing that I'll tell you is that we've been doing this for over 50 years, and everybody's been doing this. Everybody's been doing the same thing, walking out in the woods and looking for them, trying to solve everything at once, and it ain't working. It's just not working. We need to do something else. We need to. There's thousands and thousands of these sighting reports. You can data mine those sighting reports and figure out something that catches your eye, something that catches your fancy, that you can study and be able to go in there and do something very specific, solve that one little piece of the puzzle. Because right now, the Bigfoot mystery is a 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, and the best of us have about 150 pieces together.
Wow.
We know enough to know something's there. We know enough to be able to tell you a little bit about it, as much as we can. Beyond that, we don't know. There's still questions like orbs. There's still questions like interdimensional travel using portals. There's still questions of all kinds that are out there that we need to study, and we need to do it in a real scientific fashion. The scientific method will solve this mystery far more than any speculation.
Quick question. What is the name of your book again?
It is called Footprints in the Mind: The Bigfoot Witness Experience. And it was due out last week, but we've had a glitch with the publisher, so I'll be able to get to Vicky. I'll be able to get her the information about where you can get it. But it's by an Urban Press publisher.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Richie, I think she deserves an autograph book.
I would say so. Yeah.
Thank
Definitely.
you.
Definitely.
Brian said, "Does Rich think that Bigfoot can see IR light from night vision, and is thermal a better choice for nighttime research?"
Okay, seeing the IR, I don't know. They seem to understand where trail cams are. There's very few good trail cam photos of them. One of them being, my late friend Craig Sulk in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, who was on the second season of Finding Bigfoot. He got an actual pretty good picture of a Bigfoot on his property through one of the trail cams, but they're very rare. There's just not that many good ones. So they do know these things are there. Can they see the IR light? Can they hear them? I don't know. One thing that would come to my mind is that you've got to come back to the simplest measure, the simplest solution, which is they know what's around them. They know what's in their vicinity. So they'll just avoid that area and not be around. And they'll only risk it if they're really desperate for something to eat or something to drink or something like that. And the principle of Occam's razor. Occam's razor, the simplest solution is always the best one. So I just think they're absolutely tuned into their environment. They have to be in order to survive. And then they can, and they know where these things are. So they just avoid the area where we've been. Let's face it, we're bad news to them. And when we're out there looking for them, that's bad news for them. Them creeping up on us and watching what's going on is different. Okay, they're in control of that situation. So I think they just avoid the areas that we're in and are smart enough to do that.
Okay.
Rich, can you tell her about your experience in tree stand? I think she would really enjoy that.
Yeah, that was a fly by the seat of my pants night, if I ever had one. It was in southern Colorado, actually southwestern Colorado. I don't know if you saw the footage where the people on the train recorded there's supposedly a Bigfoot that they saw when they were riding this train. That was near Silverton, Colorado. This is my third sighting. Oh no, this is my second sighting. Excuse me. And it was about 50 miles outside of Silverton, Colorado, where we had this. And I'd run across a couple of guys that were doing research up in that area. And so I, drove up and joined them one time. And they had this idea. There was this canyon that they had, and they were going to put somebody in a tree stand at the end of this canyon and then go up to the other end of the canyon, and they were all going to get out of their vehicles, and they were just going to span out across the faces of this canyon and just walk, just basically drive everything that way. And I got to be the guy to sit in the tree stand. And when I first looked, the tree stand was about 12 feet off the ground, and I went, "Oh no!" And I think my exact words were, "Hail no!"
I've been in a tree stand, so
yeah. But it was one of those where you can just kind of traverse it up the tree, and so I did that I got it up to about 25 feet. I wasn't messing around. I wasn't going to do that. But I sat there in several hours, and I could start to hear them moving because when you got a bunch of individuals moving at the same time, they make noise, and it's very quiet out there. There's nothing out there. I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing wilderness experience. But being there, you start to hear. I know I heard an elk run through, and I heard some other animals run through, and then I started to hear a running sound. But it wasn't on 4 feet. You could, because on 4 feet you can hear the bum 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 bum.
Mm-hmm.
This one was bum 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 bum. It was two-legged, and it would run. I would hear it run, and then it would stop. And I would hear it run, it would stop, and it was actually running in kind of a zigzag kind of pattern. And then it got really close. I don't know if it was under the tree I was in, or it was in a tree right near where that was. But run. You could hear some, bashing through a few things, and then it stopped, and then you could hear the breathing. You could hear the, and this is in the middle of the night, by the way. I mean, I'm sitting there.
Oh no!
And I realized I just been so intent on listening to this thing that I didn't do anything. Yeah, and then I reach in my phone. I said, I got to get something on camera or on audio or something. So I'm reaching, I'm fumbling for my phone, and this thing hears me and takes off.
No.
And I just sort of sat there like, whoa, did that just happen?
I'd take the alternative of it taking off.
Yeah, but it was an experience to be sure.
Wow.
But the key to me was the bipedal running and then the breathing, because it engaged its vocal cords as it was breathing heavily, the same way we do. And it was kind of moaning and everything while it was there, just into the because this thing had been sprinting, and it had been sprinting over and over again.
Wow.
So it was if I had to hear, it would have been hair raising.
Yeah, I would think so.
Rich, you have a question. If you had to break it down just off the top of your head, and I know you're a kind of you like details, but when it comes to sightings, experiences, encounters, do you find more are in swamps, mountains, or coastal?
Question.
That's hard. They're going to be wherever. I think most of the encounters that I've heard of come from either forested areas or with forested areas close.
That's what I would think.
And I mean, basically, you're thinking about cover. You're thinking about the resources that are available in a forest, both plant life and animal life. The one thing I would tell you is look for a water source. Always look for a reliable water source. If there's a reliable water source, you'll find prey animals, and if you'll find prey animals, you'll find predators, and that's probably where you're looking for these creatures.
Makes sense.
So, for someone like Victoria that's just getting started on the subject, we know that she's going to order your book, okay? Autographed book, Richie. Where would you direct her to? Why is there a good read out there that you would recommend, or I would recommend she stays off Facebook, but I think his camera froze. So while we're waiting on his camera to come back up, my friend Tina in the chat, 20 miles up the road, she first saw a footprint in her driveway in the
Oh,
middle
wow.
of winter, barefoot footprint. And at the time, it didn't occur to her, hey, this is in the winter. Okay. And she said it was large. And so she, that kind of, threw up some flags with her. And then she saw something really big by her barn one night. That's why she asked her. And that's how we become best friends. She called me and she, well, no, we actually, believe it or not, met on a Facebook Bigfoot group. And he'll be back. He loves to talk. And I love to listen to him talk.
Yeah, he's really informative.
There he goes. We'll let him finish. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Rich. You remember the question I asked, or
yeah, just ask again, would you?
Where would you recommend her start? I mean, me and Johnny and Phil and Lynn have her back, and we'll take care of her. But what would you, if she want to do some self research, what would you recommend for her? Where would you recommend for her to start? What would you tell someone that doesn't know anything?
I would focus on your local area.
Do
as much research as you can on what's going on there. That's where you're going to start. And then also try to find some reliable sources that are out there. One of the people I absolutely follow and listen to all the time is Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. He's a anthropology professor at Idaho State University. His footprint evidence is his thing. In anthropology, he talks about humans being able to, having adapted to upright walking, and you'll learn so much by listening to a man like him. And then, once you've got the lay of the land around you, and you've got a little background that you can rely on from somebody in the science community that has championed this phenomenon. After that, it's just about what interests you. Find a particular aspect that interests you. I mean, if it's a particular behavior that you're looking for, or if it's if it's just an overall kind of reaction that you're looking for, find something in the phenomenon that listens to you that really moves you.
Okay, I like it.
And I think that's a huge thing to consider.
Victoria, do you have any more questions?
No, just ready. When we going?
Man,
So Victoria,
I was just getting warmed up.
Oh, we're not going nowhere. You just stay right.
Oh yeah, and how many guns how many guns do we take with us?
If you're with us, Johnny always has about 6. I mean, literally,
Okay.
we have in the boot. Tracy always has at least 2. I always have at least 1.
Okay.
Bill has more guns than a pawn shop, so you're in really good hands. Now, I know when Johnny and Lynn got screamed at, that's the only time they didn't even draw their weapons. You don't want, but they did take their coats off so they could get a quick draw out there. But you really don't want to go out with someone that's trigger happy. You have to be really, I mean, would you not agree, Rich? You have to be really particular on who you,
Absolutely.
because I don't want to get shot.
That makes sense. Yeah.
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 Well, the thing is, I've been invited out on several excursions where I show up and the guys are pounding beers and all this other stuff, and they're
Wow. Rich.
He's trying. There he is.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I feel like I did that to you. You were on a roll. Okay, I'm gonna sit on my hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I've refused to go out with, on expeditions with people that are like, that don't show any discipline, that don't show any reverence for the process that you're doing. And if they're out there to raise hell and have a good time, then you know what? It's probably not for you.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So I had another question. Someone said, do you think if you take a map of the Bigfoot sightings that are reported, and then you take a map of the tunnel systems in the United States, you see they kind of correspond? Do you have any opinions on that?
Look at rainfall, look at water sources. That's your best guide. If you can look at, there's a reason why there's a lot of activity in the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest gets pelted with rain. There are water sources everywhere. There's vegetation everywhere. There's cover everywhere. Those forests recoup and recover faster than any forests in North America because of the amount of rainfall that they get. And that's why. So track rainfall, track water sources, and that's a good place to start.
Okay. So I'm trying to see if there's any more questions. Now, did you break down your book about the 4 reactions to now she don't know about the dog man. Should we put that on her tonight or no?
What?
Whatever you like. Yeah. Oh, this is new. Yes.
Yes.
What is this?
Okay.
Yeah, but when you talk about the reactions that are, those are basic stress responses that human beings have. Everybody's heard of fight or flight. Okay, they know about that. There's a decent number of people that know about freezing, people that just freeze in place.
Yeah.
There are actually 2 others that are categories there. One of those is fawn or flop. Fawning is turning away from what you've seen. Flopping is just falling on the ground. They merge those together because they're kind of similar reactions. And then there's what's called a friending response. That's where somebody experiencing some sort of trauma in the middle of that stress feels some sort of intimate contact with someone involved in that, And in the case of Bigfoot experiencers, they believe there's some sort of intimate contact with the creature. They have that friending response.
Okay.
And those are long registered psychological phenomena that happen during times of acute stress. And I myself, I have definitely had that freeze response. Definitely just sat there and stared, not knowing. My first encounter, I was 40 feet from this creature, staring at it, and it was over a minute that I did that.
I understand that.
Just standing right there, looking at it, and had no idea what was going on. And it's everybody that has some sort of emotional or psychological impact had one of these reactions when they encountered the creature, and it's really eye-opening to see when you get into these things and you get into these encounters and talk with people to see how they reacted, and then you start asking them, well, what did the creature do? And most of the time they say it stood there and it stared at me and then it left. Yet that experience can traumatize somebody because it is such a reality break from what you're used to, your comfortable life that you have, and then something from the outside comes in, and it can be a really tough experience for people.
Wow.
Yeah. All right, Richie.
You're the only one that's allowed to call me that, Victoria.
Rich or Richie?
Richard, explain. You get the pleasure to explain Dogman. And now I've seen them, Victoria. I have seen them, and they are real.
Dogman is like the Bigfoot phenomenon. But you're basically seeing something that's that size, but looks kind of like a werewolf.
Oh.
Canine head, snout, that kind of thing. A lot of people report the backward knees that you get with canines and stuff like that. And you're talking about canine tracks that are about this big around. They're huge. And
Have you seen this?
Yes, ma'am.
Whoa.
Yep.
Whoa.
Now, I haven't had an encounter with that myself, but a friend of mine studies the phenomenon and has, and they're very real. There are dogman research groups throughout this country right now.
Wow.
Michigan was the epicenter for that, but they seem to have spanned out, and people are starting to report these places, or these creatures in all kinds of places now. Texas is the latest hotbed for dogman sightings.
Wow.
North Carolina too.
Yep.
That because the dogman is actually what got me into the Bigfoot world. And you see a lot of pictures of them. They're like overly massive and they're like scary. But the one I saw was toned down. It looked nothing like you see on these podcasts where, I mean, and I hate to say any names, but it was toned down. It was not the, I mean, trust me, when you see one, you'll never forget them. But it was not as, I mean, it was dramatic, but it was not. I think the pictures you see out there are overkill sometimes.
So what area were you in when that happened?
Cumberland County. The next one was in Robeson County.
Wow.
And I spoke with a soldier in Cumberland County that also was stalked by the same thing. About a year later, on the same, the creeks connect. And by the way, the bird flies probably about maybe 2 miles where he had it. And because of the job I did at the time, you know, I was accessible, and he happened to ask me the right question at the right time. Matter of fact, I recorded his encounter. He gave me permission to.
Wow. That's crazy. I had never heard of that. I've heard of Bigfoot. I hadn't heard of that one.
If you want to get into the spectrum of cryptids that are reported out there, skinwalkers and Jersey Devil and the Dover Demon and all kinds of these things that are out there. Yeah.
Wow.
The Mothman's a big one.
I've heard that. I've heard that term. I've heard that.
Yeah, it's a creature that haunts Richard Gere.
Yeah, I've heard
that. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's but Mothman is reported quite a few areas. Chicago, not just Point Pleasant, West Virginia, but Chicago has had sightings. I believe there's been a couple in San Francisco. So.
Wow.
So Victoria, when you first come on tonight, what did you expect? Did you get your answers that you needed? Do you have a different outlook on the people in the Bigfoot community now, or what could we have done?
I'm definitely wanting to go, and I mean, I was borderline anyway. It was more of a question of, why wouldn't people at least be open-minded to the concept, until it's proven wrong. And at this point, I've heard enough that, I mean, to me, it's just a matter of, I'd really like to actually see it and get the experience.
Maybe you don't.
Preferably up in a very, very tall tree with a few guns or whatever, but, whatever. But yeah, no, seriously, I would love to go and hear it, see it, learn about it. I didn't expect to hear all the information I did, or so many encounters and different, just there's a lot of information there. You definitely know what you're talking about. I mean, that's
now,
it. So,
have they told you that they can really stink? They can really stink. I haven't experienced it myself, but there's a lot of people that report a horrible rotten egg, wet dog combination kind of smell.
Is it because they are out in the open so much and just the size?
You tell me. You tell me. It's hard to say. There are several different schools of thought. One is that it has an apocrine gland, kind of like a gorilla does. That they release that. It releases a pheromone, but it has that odor to it that's trying to drive people off or declare territory or something like that. Yeah. But one thing I'll point out that interestingly, and one of the things that's one portion of research that I've gotten into here in the last few years is that there are 14 shared physical traits that are common in Bigfoot sightings that match physical traits of human beings that have gigantism or acromegaly.
Ah, okay.
One of those traits is acute body odor
Oh,
because of excessive sweating and things like that.
that would make sense.
And you can't rule out that it may be the same, because I will tell you, because of the human adapted foot, we know that from footprint evidence that the foot is adapted to upright walking. But you can't just have that to walk upright. You have to have the corresponding adaptations to the ankle, to the knee, to the hip, the lower lumbar region of your back, and the neck as well, for being able to face forward when you walk.
Yeah.
Of all the creatures that we know of that have had those particular sets of adaptations, they all belong to the human line of evolution.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So now you've got something walking upright, and it's not just that it's walking upright. The foot is adapted perfectly to carrying a lot of weight when it's walking like that. The mid-tarsal brake, which is what for most of our modern humans, the mid-tarsal region, the mid-tarsal joint doesn't move because it's fixed. Okay, but anywhere between 7 and 11% of our population at any given time of human beings has that joint active.
Oh.
So what it does, instead of somebody coming up on their toes and having all that weight on those metatarsal bones, there's a break. So the foot kind of breaks like this.
Yeah.
Kind of breaks like this and then flattens out and then pushes off. And that allows all that weight to be carried without the stress on those metatarsal bones in the foot and breaking them. And one of the things that I'll tell you that absolutely gives you that evidence is that there are a ton of really big basketball players from the NBA and around the world that have had their careers ended by chronic metatarsal breaks because they're so big and their activity level is so intense and running and jumping and the stress level on their feet that those bones can't take that. Now, if they had that mid-tarsal break, their careers would probably be very different. But that's what happens to people with modern humans when they get really big. So what happens when another kind of human is regularly that big?
Yeah.
Those adaptations happen and everything's there. That's the line of thinking that I'm on when it comes to the origin of these creatures.
Question. Has anybody found any skeletal remains or anything like that of a Bigfoot?
None that are documented, none that we know of.
Okay.
And that's always a tough question that people have. And I would love to give you one simple answer for it, but it's more than likely a combination of factors that you're dealing with. Number one, there are so few of these things around. There's the best guesses we have, there's between 2,000 and 2,500 of them in all of North America.
Wow.
So they're very, very scarce. Number two, it's hard enough to find them when they're moving around in different locations. When they stop and pass away in one location, it's almost impossible to find anything. And three, you're looking at the fact that any forest reclaims, dead material very quickly. It's basically a recycling center, and that's how it works. I mean, one of these carcasses could be gone in as little as 2 months. If it's just sitting out in the forest area. Okay, and then you factor in there the intelligence that these creatures have. If they do find caves to dwell in. Do they have any funerary practices? Which means do they do something with their dead? Do they take them deep into a cave or something like that? That's a possibility.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, there's a documentary that was on Netflix. I believe it's still on there right now that documents a new find of modern humans doing that. and I believe it was, I want to say it was in Argentina. They found deep caves where down in the deep tank bottom of these caves, they found humans that were laid to rest down there, and with funerary kind of proceedings that were going. So maybe that was learned behavior from us. Maybe we learned it from them. There's a possibility there. But again, let's take a look at this thing. Somebody focus on this and try and figure out that little piece of the puzzle. That's to me, that's the most fascinating part about this. When I stumbled into my research, I realized I was in a highly specialized thing that very few people were involved in and had done anything with. And John Baranchuk is a guy I know. He's a prominent researcher, and he wrote a book that was all incredibly scientifically detailed about all these emotional and psychological implications that were coming out of it. And nobody wanted to read it. He had a hard time getting anyone to read it because it was so deep into the science. So when I wrote my book, I would bring up, part of the phenomenon, and then use a story, a sighting report that I had done to kind of illustrate that. And it goes back and forth between that the entire book that I have. So it's a little more relatable, and it's not 400 pages to read or anything like that. So it's not an intimidating kind of work. I had to work really hard to make sure that balance was there. But we need somebody to take a look at at this part of the phenomenon and say, okay, what happens to large animals that die in forests? What are Stone Age funerary practices like that we know of? What do we know about any of this stuff? And get into that and start connecting a few dots in that area.
That's good.
Any more questions?
No, my mind's going in circles.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do is we will try, when Victoria goes out with us, we will try to go live in the field. If not, we'll come back with some video and we'll let everyone know how she did. She's a country girl, and she's disciplined with a firearm, so yeah, she can bring a firearm with us.
I'll climb in a tree stand in a heartbeat versus anything getting to me.
That is something I would actually like to do. Rich thinks some of the giant bones found could be Bigfoot. Brian asked that.
Could be. But the thing is, we just don't have anything to compare them to right now. Wow. There's a theory that Gigantopithecus became Bigfoot, or Bigfoot is Gigantopithecus. We don't know. We couldn't tell you because there's nowhere close to a full Gigantopithecus skeleton that's been found. There's a couple of jaw bones, about 100 teeth or so. We know they're from a very large ape, but beyond that, we don't know. But personally, I think because if it was an ape, probably not what these creatures are. Something similar, maybe a competitor at one time, but I mean, I'm not making the connection to where Gigantopithecus could be one of these. But the giants that have been found, there's more and more evidence of giants being found all the time, and who knows what we could be finding the bones of Enkidu from the Epic of Gilgamesh someday. Who knows? But if we don't know what we're looking at, how are we ever going to chronicle them? The reason we don't have very many fossils of Gigantopithecus is because those bones were found and dug up by people in China and then ground down. They were termed as dragon bones.
Oh, wow.
You grind those down and they use them for medicinal purposes. Yeah, and there's also a lot of aardvarks over there, anteaters over there, that they eat bones, destroy those things. So they're very hard to come by.
That's wild.
Richard, can you do the 14 characteristics that you were talking about?
Oh, right off the top of my head? Wow. Maybe a little more caffeine. Basically, you're looking at oversized hands and feet, elongated limbs, which is why it's so easy to see when something is real, when a video is real and it's not. Gotcha. Is the proportioning that you have. Okay, you're talking about a head that comes into a crest. Okay. In extreme cases of acromegaly and gigantism, that happens to humans. There's a heavyweight boxer many years back named Nikolai Valuev, who was 7'1", and he's from Russia. And he was the heavyweight champion of the world for a while, and you could see his forehead just basically faded back. He went into like a cone size, cone on his head. Another thing is enlarged brow and chin and cheekbones, pronounced. That happens. A deepening of the voice that you get. I mean, a really, really deep kind of voice. If you ever have the opportunity to listen to a interview with one of the gentlemen that plays in the NBA, and his name is escaping me right now. Brooke Lopez is his name. Brooke Lopez. Okay. He has the beginning of that when he speaks. His voice is extremely deep, and to the point where it sounds almost artificially produced.
Wow.
So it's that type of effect. And then, what are some other ones? Again, I mentioned the body odor. There's also a phenomenon where there's a skin darkening of people with gigantism and acromegaly, or agromegaly, excuse me. Man, I can't remember all of them. It's crazy. I can tell you what I had for lunch today, and that's about it.
It was eating when we got off. Hey, yeah. So one thing I noticed about the odor, and it may not be for everybody, but I know two things to look for, Victoria. The woods get really quiet. Another thing is what I've noticed about the odor. You know, when you have an odor and it kind of lingers. What happened to me and Richard Turner that day? We were in the woods and we had the odor. It was like there, and then boom, gone. It didn't drift away. It didn't do. It was just like boom, gone. Never had an experience like that again. And it was like, well, it didn't gradually fade away. It didn't go, with the wind. I don't even think the wind was blowing that day, but it was like there and gone. You had anything you want to add to that, Rich?
Yeah, there was probably not a Taco Bell anywhere to be found either. So, no, but those odors are a real sign that to some people, and the odor itself can be bewildering. You can say, "Man, what is that? I've never smelled anything that horrible in my life."
What a good morning.
Yeah, I've heard that description from a lot of people that have had that. I mean, in the 4 encounters I've had, I've never experienced the odor, and in a lot of ways, I'm not disappointed because of the description of it.
All right,
I get that one.
So, Victoria, what are you going to take away tonight from this?
Honestly, now my curiosity is up, so I don't know how soon I'll go to bed because I'm probably going to do a little research for a minute. But basically, I mean, it's got my interest up, and I definitely believe, that they do exist. Talking with you, and just hearing about, more in depth, what you said. So, really want to get the book and just do some more research, watch those films, just look at that and go. So, yeah.
Oh, we're taking you. For the people that are still in the chat, if you think you want to see another show like this, just say yes in the comments. Richie, what did you take away? Do you think it was successful or a good thing to do, or in general, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think it's absolutely a great idea. I thought that coming in, and I believe that now. Absolutely, I believe that now. And the more information is shared, and it's good information, it's not just gossip, it's not just, crazy stories or anything like that. The more solid information that can be shared, the better off we all are. Because one of the biggest things inhibiting Bigfoot research is that everybody keeps their findings to themselves. Because everybody's trying for that $1 million payday. And when it comes down to it, when these creatures are proven to be real, they're going to be looking for experts. And if you do your work right and you're dedicated to what you're doing, you definitely are going to be one of those people that they'll have to turn to, because you know more about a certain aspect of what's going on than anybody else. And that's what I think is really important. And so when it comes to sharing information and answering questions and everything, I'm all for it. I think more researchers should do that and should get out in these forums and do something like that. I'll tell you what I would like to see. Put a researcher like me on a show with somebody who is a decided skeptic and go from there. Because skeptics ask the most wonderful questions. They ask great questions and really push you to come up with the answers and make sure you're doing your homework.
That's good.
I will work on that if you agree to it. One of the things that I found that's going to be hard for me is to get, a respectful pair, researcher and skeptic, because it can get overheated, and that I don't want to I don't mind debate. I don't mind heated debate, but I don't want it to lose the communication in it. So I will work on that.
Makes sense.
And I will try to pair you with someone that asks you some really tough questions.
Love it. I love to do it, because those are the best questions to answer. And if I don't know, I'll write it down and I'll find out. I'll get on it. And that's the great thing. I tell people all the time, if I'm the smartest person sitting in the room, they're in trouble. Okay. I might be the hardest working person in that room, but if I'm the smartest person sitting in that room, there's something that needs to be, you need to fumigate. I mean, I'm telling you, bring back the saliva test or something. But it's just a matter of how much work you want to put in on this and how serious you are about it. Because there are no experts at this point. None. I would never even refer to myself as anywhere close to an expert. But I know what I know. I know the one facet.
That's it. Well, I think the really good thing about this was, you answered my questions, and you came across as very honest in what you were saying, and that that speaks volumes. So I appreciate your taking the time to kind of give me some info and answer my questions and stuff, and I came up with a few in between that I hadn't wrote down, but it was very interesting, and I'm sure that I have a lot more to learn. So,
Victoria, just remember, you might go out for years and years and never have an experience, but the friends you meet along the way, the good food, the camping.
That's a great thing.
I love it. I love it.
And before we leave, Philip says, I have done some debates, but not a match for Rich.
And I can honestly say that I didn't come here to convince you either. I just came here to answer the questions and tell what I know and what I can say. And I think several times I would say there's so much that we don't know, or I don't know is not a dirty answer in this
That's
field.
right. You're right.
Not a dirty answer in science.
Yep.
You just have to be willing to say that and realize that you're not going to know everything.
That's good.
Well, I just wanted to thank you both for making this a success, because you two. I'm sorry, Richard, go ahead. I just wanted to thank you both for making this a success, because this was a really.
My internet connection stinks. I apologize.
I will say, we're in the middle of a windstorm. We weren't sure.
No, right.
Tonight. But I wanted to thank you both for making this a success. This was really a factor if we would do this again or not. So if either one of you have suggestions of someone that wants to come on the show and have a conversation, not an argument, we would love to have another show. I at least want to do one a month.
Good point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
going to get that book.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Footprints in the Mind, it's going to be on Urban Press Publishers.
Yeah, I made notes.
Victoria, I'll send you links to his. We've got 2 shows with Richie.
Okay,
that.
nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
y'all. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone in the chat.
Bye. Cut it off.